Okay. So I guess just to really distinguish, I think I've covered this off already. CISCA level 1 is really the level 1 leaders, with CISCA 360 being level 2 and 3. So CISCA level 1, it's different because the questions reflect the extra layer and extra level of responsibility that CEOs and board members have over an organisation, and it's more about strategy, governance, and ensuring processes are embedded within an organisation, not necessarily delivering on those processes. So the language and the responsibility is quite different. It is very similar though, so it still correlates with the capability framework and the quality standards. It still has the same 6 domains. The survey process is very similar. The report will nearly look identical, and the self-development guide will be the same at this point. So most of the collateral will look exactly the same. You might have to double check which one it is. It's just the assessment and the questions are quite different. We've got a couple of examples of those. So, you know, for example, under leading others, one of the sort of areas is around how they deal with challenging situations. For a CISCA 360, the question is addresses challenging situations effectively. For a level 1 leader, it's deal with organisational issues without delay. You can see how it still assesses the same factor or the same component within the leading others domain, but the language is slightly different. So you can see there's another few examples of the difference in the languages. Now, obviously we'll be sharing these slides after today, so you don't have to jot any of these down or anything like that, but just wanted to share with you, it's really around the language of the questions being pitched to reflect the additional responsibility that a more strategic leader has, or a level 1 leader has, rather than a level 2 or 3. Now, I'm going to talk about the bit I'm most excited about, which is CISCA, and the rest of the content today will be focused on CISCA. But just if you want more information about level 1 version of CISCA, please reach out to Don. I'm more than happy to provide that info, and that is ready to launch as of today. So anytime we can get that going. We've already got a couple in the pipeline at the moment. So CISCA is, it evolved from the actual leadership capability framework as well. It evolved from the origins of CISCA. But what we did was we tried to create a comprehensive assessment. So the feedback we got from providers and you know, the CEOs that we were working with was that they already do assessments. They already assess staff. They have a staff survey already. They already get customer feedback in some form or another. And so rather than adding another assessment for the front line, we wanted to create an assessment that replaced everything they're doing. So we know this industry is time poor, and we know it's hard to get people to sit down and actually complete an inventory. So rather than adding to that, it's still important to measure staff capability and service capability, but how can we do that in replacement of everything they're already doing? So CISCA ended up being a much more comprehensive assessment than originally designed. It involves consumer feedback, it measures employee engagement, and I'm going to talk about all the other things it measures and give you some examples of those shortly. What it enables organisations to do, and what you can work with your organisations on, is it can tick off the requirements of standard 6, 7, and 8.3/A. They can measure their care capability, employee engagement, customer satisfaction, and performance against the aged care standards. So they're really able to see some correlations and things like that there. They can benchmark each team's performance and engagement across the organisation. I'm going to share a case study with you of a 14-site facility that we've just run a CISCA through, and show the differences in how one site was able to be benchmarked across the other, so they can plan interventions moving forward. We can also combine the data with organisational performance data, so we can really see where things like workers' compensation spend, turnover, sick leave, leave liability is also correlated with each site or team's performance in CISCA, and start to really get some understanding there. And then in time, our goal is to have a larger ability to benchmark. So we are able to benchmark and provide a an industry standard for some of the measures within CISCA, but over time, and hopefully by the end of the year, our best hope is we'll have large enough data of organisations throughout the country that will actually be able to show an organisation where they're sitting in comparison to the sample. So that's a bit of a watch this space in future. So just to reinforce, CISCA, if you haven't seen any comms or anything about it, it's a team assessment. So we don't assess an individual frontline person. It's not Kathy, a care support worker. It's Kathy's whole team. So one site or one, internal team within the organisation. Now, the team can be defined by the organisation as any homogenous team. The team can also be any size. There's no limit on the number of people that sit within a team, because we know some sites and teams, because of the nature of their size and their rosters, they might have 100 people. If they have 100 staff, that's okay. 100 people will be part of that one assessment. And so the only restrictions we have on that is we need a minimum of 5 people within a team. So that might be relevant to, say, a HR team or a finance team. They're often a bit smaller. We still need a minimum of 5 just to protect individual anonymity in the actual survey. So it assesses a team. The reason we've assessed a team rather than individual is what we've found in working with the industry, as the quality of care is impacted by a number of people. It's not just one person. So the quality of care one consumer receives is actually impacted by their direct carer or carers, the leadership and the management of that team or site, the schedulers, the finance people that process their invoices and work out their payment structure, all of those things that impact on that, that team or that are part of that team impact on that person's care. So it would actually be unfair to assess one care support worker individually. It's really looking at the whole team. So in order to get that team assessment, we've added a couple of different measures across the board. The first thing we measure is frontline care capability. So this is something that looks very similar to the CISCA framework. It's just from frontline perspective. So all the staff and all team members will complete this aspect of the survey, and the team's supervisor or leader or leaders. So one site might have 3 people in their leadership team. That would be the leadership group. And what we're able to see there is some really interesting differences between a leader's perspective of the team capability and the team's perspective of the team capability. In the example I'm going to share with you shortly, it was interesting. Some sites, the team had a much higher view of their own capability than their leader, and that's a really useful conversation to have. And in other sites, it was opposite. The team were identifying some big gaps that the leader actually wasn't aware of. Again, a very different and interesting conversation. So the learning and value of the frontline care capability assessment offers an organisation is it links with CISCA, so it's got the same domains. And what it does is it gives the team and the leader of that team, and then also the org development or whoever the people are supporting and developing that team, an opportunity to identify the areas of greatest opportunity. So what are the frontline capability gaps for that team? Is it their ability to respond to change? Is it their ability to deal with conflict within themselves? Is it their ability to be timely in the delivery of their services? So there's a number of different questions that fit under the same 6 domains that the team get feedback on frontline care capability. We also measure customer feedback. So customers, consumers, clients, I know everyone uses different language depending on your providers and organisation. We can also change the language. We've gone with consumer in the stock standard questionnaire, and we know that offends some people as well. Some people prefer customers, some people prefer clients. So happy to make that word change. I'll use consumer just because it's the most standard. So in terms of customer or consumer feedback, includes the consumer outcomes from the standards. So the auditing bodies use these same consumer outcomes. It's basically how they're part of the standards that are published for everybody. If the standards are upheld, here are the outcomes that consumers should experience. And we ask the consumers, are you experiencing these outcomes? They're the same questions or very similar questions to what the auditing bodies use. So it's a great proactive way of assessing how well that site or that team might stack up before a formal audit or a spot visit. We also ask for open text comments. Now, what's fantastic about this is we get an ability to have some really rich data. So in the case study that I'm going to share with you shortly, we were able to see some really beautiful comments, and we've actually used a lot of that for that particular organisation is now embarking on a bit of a marketing strategy given COVID and everything that's going on, because they actually ran their survey during COVID. And so what was really interesting was they were able to say, wow, in spite of everything that's going on, I know there's been a lot of bad press in the sector, here are some really beautiful comments and experiences of our residents. And so they're able to actually take those and use that as part of the marketing strategy. So really helpful to have some open text comments, and to also see the really specific examples of where things are going wrong. So we're able to get some themes out of that as well. We also get a customer satisfaction rating that's done in two forms. It's a general customer satisfaction. We also get a net promoter score. And the net promoter score is really powerful because we do have industry standard net promoter scores. So we're able to see how well those sites and how well the whole organisation is performing against the rest of the country in terms of net promoter. Who gives that feedback? The customers or consumers, but also their family members, because what we've realised is a lot of the dealings of the care may not actually be with the resident, depending on their condition and their experience. So we also invite their family members to give feedback. That organisation can have a choice of combining the family members and consumer feedback into one, I guess, picture, or they can split it if they want to see if there's any differences between consumers and their family members. So that's an option for you to consider. All of these little tidbits and options, obviously when we launch a project, we will hold your hand and help, and Donna will help explain all of those in terms of the launch, but just mentioning a couple while we go through. The learning and value in the organisation, as you can see, this is a sort of a compliance-based thing, so I personally think it's really helpful for the organisation to get this, but also it can really meet a lot of the compliance aspects that they're already hopefully doing. I believe it is required for people to be doing these things, or providers to be doing these things. If they're not, then they should be, so they can tick off these are the requirements. Staff engagement, we know, has a significant link to care capability and the provision of care. So we assess that. All team leaders, the team's supervisor or leader will complete this, and all staff. And the value is we're able to see what are some of the internal staff challenges that might be impacting on their attitude, their motivation, and their provision of care. So there's a really great opportunity there as well. This is the one that can replace any staff satisfaction or engagement surveys that the organisation might already be doing. We also assess staff culture from a score and then an open text comment as well. So here's another great example to get an understanding of what is actually going on at that particular site or team that we need to be aware of. And so we get a really rich picture of some issues, but also some things that are working really well that we feed back. Lastly, when we say in development, we have it ready, we just haven't done it for anyone yet. So it's very new, this additional piece. We also assess staff safety culture. So some feedback we got early on is that safety is incredibly important in the sector right now, and understanding not just safety performance, which is often a lagging indicator like injury rates and workers' compensation spend and things like that, actually understanding the leading measure. So the safety culture that leads to how people behave is really important. So that is ready to go. It's just not in the case study I'm going to share with you yet, because we launched that before this was ready. As you can see, it's very comprehensive. So a lot of sections, a lot of questions, just naming that the consumers and family members only fill in about 25% of the survey. So it's much shorter for them. So those of you that are thinking, my goodness, it's been really hard for someone, say with dementia or something like that, to sit down and fill in this massive survey. It's only this section that consumers and family members fill in the customer feedback. It's very short. It's written to a reading standard of age 7. And that was advice we got from the industry in terms of pitching that fairly. So our experience is that we haven't had any pushback to our family members and residents and consumers completing that. It doesn't seem too long. One request we've had is for them to do it on paper. So we just added that step in. Everything else is done electronically using the same platform as CISCA, very user-friendly. It is longer for staff though than the CISCA survey. So our understanding is it's about 10 to 15 minutes for people to fill in the CISCA. I'd give them up to 20 for the CISCA. There's obviously more questions, and depending on how detail they feel like being in the open text comments, some might take up to half an hour, again, depending on the staff member. So that might be a blocker for people. It's really helping the organisation understand that it's comprehensive though, and it would hopefully replace any other survey they're already doing. Now, I'll check in. Donna, you've been managing the chat function. Is there any questions or anything at this point, or a good time to pause if there was?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. I've answered them, but it's always good to get verification. So Susan just asked about each time we talk about aged care, can that be swapped out for disability care? And my response was yes. And I think that was the main one around in terms of the actual tool itself.
Sure, and I do keep referring to aged care. Apologies, that's the only case study in the sample we have so far. Yes, the answer is yes, we definitely can replace for disability, just like the CISCA, it has the disability standards as well. So we're definitely able to do that. So what it looks like, I'm actually gonna quickly skip past this because I'm going to, I'm wanting a case study more useful. I'll go through this super quickly. So the staff capability is presented in a very similar picture to what the CISCA framework looks like, with the current feedback and then the gap. So that will look very familiar to all of you. The staff engagement is presented in a number of different graphs, and you can actually see the level of engagement to each component of overall engagement as well. So engagement includes career development, intention to stay, psychological contract, commitment to organisational goals, etc. on that list. And there's a number of different questions, so we can see the overall engagement score, but then also the engagement with that particular factor. So we can really drill down to where some areas are to develop. Customer feedback, as I mentioned, is presented in both customer satisfaction score and a net promoter score. The great thing about a net promoter score, as I said, industry standard, and again, this is aged care industry, just naming that's because all this sample report comes from aged care so far. The aged care industry standard for a net promoter score is 44. So we're able to actually see how a provider and organisation compares to that. So here's the case study, or the example I wanted to share with you, and how it all can fit together. So this particular organisation, as I said, they have 14 teams or sites that we ran the assessment through. I'm going to share first the CISCA feedback from one particular site first, and then show how that stood up in the rest of the organisation. So this particular residential aged care facility has 155 staff, so quite large. And on the left is the CISCA profile of the manager. So this is the care manager of that site. Now this manager is described as a lovely leader, absolutely lovely. She takes too much on, she does it all herself, and actually disempowers staff in the process. That was really what came out of her CISCA debrief. Her biggest leadership gaps, it's hard to see, I know, on the actual graph there, so just identifying the 4 that were the biggest gaps, but communicates effectively, provides clear feedback, creates a motivating climate, and a good teacher. So these were her 4 key development areas. Let's take a look at the CISCA profile for her site. Again, quite small, hard to see, so let me just pull out the biggest gaps. Her team's biggest gaps: adjusting well to change, cope well with stress or pressure, have an enthusiastic approach to work, manage team conflict, and aware of their impact on others. So you can really see how there's a link between her disempowering but caring and lovely style is actually having on the capability of her staff. They're not feeling enthusiastic, then her lack of providing a motivating climate is obviously impacting on their enthusiasm. They're not coping well with stress or pressure because they're never asked to use their own thought process, so they're never asked to be accountable or responsible, and so their resilience is low. They don't adjust well to change. They're definitely not managing team conflict within themselves, and because of that, they're not getting feedback. So one of her biggest development areas was around feedback. They're not aware of their impact on others. Their staff engagement was at 66%. And that was actually 10% lower than the rest of the organisation. So this organisation, quite a large one in Western Australia, their overall engagement was 76%, and this site had 10% lower than the rest of the organisation. So there's obviously something going on that really needs to be focused here. Outcomes. As I said, they not only had lower engagement, they had the lowest customer satisfaction and consumer NPS across the whole organisation. So this is where they were able to see, wow, it's actually having an impact on our consumers. There was a 25% staff turnover, 14% rate of ER cases. So there was a lot of energy being spent on this particular site. They did not meet their training compliance organisational targets. So there were less people that had been trained, that had needed to be trained in terms of to meet their own targets around compliance than there had been. And they had the largest leave liability across the whole organisation. So it was amazing to see how the real flow through for this site from the leadership profile, the unintended impact that, and again, I'm not putting it all on her, by no means. There's 155 staff in this facility. There's obviously a lot of things going on. Yet you can really start seeing the follow-on effect of team and organisational culture, individual leadership impact, engagement, and then consumer outcomes. So now looking at, so this was them here, see site one. I've de-identified the site names here, but you can see what the organisation was able to get was how their particular sites were all performing across all of the different domains across CISCA. Obviously there's some real strength, so their ability to care safely was seen to be the strongest capability across all sites, but they're also able to compare some of the higher performing sites down to the lower performing sites, and site one is the one I've used for the example previously. So given all of that, just wanted to check in. And Donna, there might be some more questions, and then I'm going to launch a bit of a poll here. So I'll go back and then ask you, you can answer any other questions that have come through, and then we'll check in with you guys. I've got a poll to ask you around what else you need for more info.
Okay, so everyone's obviously, their brains are thinking as you're sharing all this information, Sash, because there's a number of questions that have come through. Joe has mentioned just the fact that the language with disability care is often different to aged care, and that there's a concern that might be off-putting for those participating. Sure. My response to that was around the fact that it's the disability, the CISCA for disability would be a separate survey. It's a separate questionnaire, so we have the ability to tailor language appropriately.
Definitely, and so we've also got we learnt that. So one of our members of our team, Jess, she works part-time for a disability, NDIS disability provider, and she was able to be really helpful with us around language. And so our self-development guide has actually been rewritten to reflect participants and the participant area approach rather than often what we're more familiar with. I know I can speak, I work mostly in the aged care space and community care space, and so my language is quite different. So we've already tailored a self-development guide specifically to reflect disability, and we've changed a lot of the examples, the terminology in the guide. We'll obviously be using that same language in any CISCA survey design as well.
Awesome, thanks, Sash. Susan asked the question about whether the leader actually completes the team assessment as well.
They do, and so you're able to actually see the difference. So the leader completes the team assessment, and we're able to, so they're included in the engagement, they're included in the staff culture and everything like that. But when we get to this, we're able to actually separate. So just like the CISCA breakout section of the report, if you're familiar with it, where you see typically the individual, their manager, their peers, their direct reports, this time it's the team. So it's not one person, so it's team, the leadership team. So it might just be one person, one manager, or it might be 3 people if they want to include their care coordinators or 2 ICs. Then they've got consumer and family. So that's the way it's split. So the actual report looks very similar, but you actually get breakout feedback for each question for those areas. And particularly you can actually see the difference for each question in terms of capability gap for the leaders and the overall staff. For this case study, I combine them all together. So I haven't separated what the leader thought of the team versus what the team thinks of the team.
Right, thanks, Ash. Wayne was asking about, in showing the results, we show that we've got the number of staff as the sort of subheading. And the query was around potentially showing aged care places as well, or as an alternative, so a number of aged care places.
I see what you're saying. It's hard to know because when we do, good question. Let's explore that offline. It's funny. We used to present in the feedback for the survey the response rate. You remember this, Donna, for that other one of your clients? We used to talk about response rate. Then of staff. So is it a 40% response rate for the survey, or is it a 20%? Then we found the number of it's so hard to bed down the actual number of staff that work at that site. And so we realized, you know what, let's just present the raw data. So you got 60 responses. That seems to be the fair way, and you can figure out your own response rate. Not sure with how to bring that question into it though, but let's explore that further offline.
Great. Okay, so as we've been chatting, some more questions have come through.
Cool.
So Susan, just qualifying your question around the outcomes were from other organisational metrics?
Yes. Susan, feel free to come off mute if you want to flesh your question out a bit further.
Sorry, yeah, and I was just on those other ones to do with ER cases and all that, so I'm assuming that, yeah, that's just...
Yeah, so they provided us additional data. And so just naming to all of you, one of the great ways, obviously an outcome is that we measure that's part of CISCA is customer satisfaction and net promoter score. However, it is really helpful to an organisation to see any of the data in the context of the bigger picture. It's also really helpful for us as DDI, as a research piece to continue to build our data set. So what we're offering to APs at the moment is if you are able to collect organisational data, we will run those correlational analysis and even causational analyses for you. We've partnered up with UTS in Sydney. And they are working with us on a project to start running more causational analysis. So obviously the interest for us is to get the data. So we'll do that additional piece at no additional charge to the CISCA process. It just requires you as the accredited practitioners working with your providers to actually ask them about their turnover, ask them about their, ER cases and things like that. And if you're able to collect that data and provide it to us, we're more than happy to draw some correlations for you on that. Bit of a win-win.
Sash, Joe was asking to clarify for disability which standards we're using. So there is the NDIS standards and the national standards for disability services.
So we are using, Donna, do you have it close to mind, or I might have to go out of my screen to get it? You've asked me this question before. It's the one, it's the quality, it's a long sentence. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Have you got it in front of you at all? It's like NDIS, quality standards and national indicator, but that's probably not right. It's something like that.
Right. What if I just take an action to double check it and communicate that to everybody?
Thank you. I don't want to lose the screen when I do that.
Yes. Okay, other questions? Mental health teams would also be valuable. Is it in development, Arlene?
Yes, so it was actually in development before disability, and then there were no takers. So it's there, it's ready to go. The questions are written. We haven't put it into the platform or anything like that, meaning we probably just need a 2-week warning. If you are interested in doing that, we developed them last year. I remember working when I was over at one of the conferences, the AXA conferences, we were working on that. So it's probably October last year, and then it's got put on hold. So if you have a provider, then let's talk. Let's get it happening. We probably, as I said, we probably needed an additional 2 weeks in the lag because we haven't actually embedded them into the platform. But they're there. And on that, self-development guide. So we haven't started because of all of that. It got put on hold for disability. You know how I mentioned there's a disability version of the self-development guide with all the language? We haven't rewritten it for mental health. So that would also need to be done. Happy to do it, just waiting on appetite. So if you've got the appetite, we will put it as a priority in development.
So that's all the questions, Sash. The other comments relating to helping us figure out which standards we've used. But I will actually go into our documentation and grab that and communicate that to everybody.
Great. So I've just sent you all a bit of a check-in question. So one of our biggest things now is we would really love you to get out there and talk about CISCA. And we need to know how confident do you feel in doing that. As Donna mentioned at the beginning, those of you that are already CISCA accredited, technically at the end of today, you're CISCA accredited. Go for it. You may, go off and have these conversations. However, obviously, we'll hold your hand a lot more in the administration, the questions about how to launch it, and we'll hold your hand through that first administration process, but you're ready to go. And that might be a blocker for some of you. So we want to just check in around, firstly, how confident do you feel at this point talking about CISCA with a potential organisation and client? Awesome to see at least one person out there's very confident. I hope you're having some of those this week. And yeah, if you need some more information or something like that, please let us know what type of information. Then the second question is around how confident do you feel at this point delivering a debrief? Now, I totally acknowledge that we haven't even talked about that part. However, we know a lot of you already work in this space. You're already dealing with culture. You're already dealing with staff surveys and things like that. So I just wanted to check in because that would be another component of resources and support we want to design. We just wanted to get the market for whether that would be a need or whether you guys totally have it. So give you a few more. I can see 7 out of 10 of you have voted. So I'll give you those last 3 of you a couple of minutes just to put your last thoughts in. It's completely anonymous if that helps. If you're not feeling confident at all, it's okay. You can say no, no one else will see that. And then the next question would be for if you could do with some more information. I can see there's a couple of you there. What specifically? So Donna, I know that would be really helpful for you to know what else you can provide to help people. Obviously, these slides we'll provide after today. And there's a lot, we've got a CISCA sample report. I'm not sure if you've all seen that. Donna, let's put that in the collection of information we'll circulate after today, so you can actually see a sample report.
And looking at NDIS versus the aged care quality framework. Quite often in organisations, if we're doing this holistically, you've got organisations that do both. So a lot of my clients have a disability division and they've got an aged care division where they do either home care or they do resi home care and they do NDIS and they do a whole range of other community programs as well.
Yeah.
So the one of the things I'm trying to apply this framework is that can you almost like a bit like a smorgasbord, a buffet, you pick that bit, you pick that bit, put that to them, pick this bit for them, and then bring it all together at the end?
So you can. You can definitely provide a buffet and different sites could do different versions. You can't bring it all together at the end. That would be the bit that's missing because they're different. So one of the organisations I work very closely with is a community care provider, and they provide both aged care and disability care as part of their community care. They've gone with the aged care. So what we've found is even the organisations that are providing some aspects of disability care, the aged care standards, the way they're written, apart from the word aged care, they're actually very useful to still get feedback on. So it's not that they can't be measured on those questions, that they're still helpful. So we've found for organisations that actually do want to see a full picture combined, it's better to use one version. And we've recommended, or we've found that organisations, and same with the CISCA. So organisations, if they've got a leadership team and some people work in disability, but they want to get an aggregate, they've actually all just done the standard CISCA aged care version. However, if there is a provider that only provides disability, then in that case, it's probably more relevant for them to do the disability version. And lastly, that is an option to do smorgasbord. If there's a site that only does disability, and then there's, I'm thinking Rocky Bay, for example, then let's do it that way. Just know that we won't be able to pull the data together to give any whole of organisation perspective because the questions will be different. And sorry, I cut out a little bit there before. I'm not sure. I think my internet crashed and then came back. So sorry if I lost you. I'm back.
It's Wayne. In the Rocky Bay example, for Sasha, could you not then perhaps use the new level 1 instrument to get the governance shape of the responses of the organisation and just work that out with the 2 contributing sections, so the disability services and any aged care services they might have.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, you totally can. It just purely, I'm thinking like an example, one organisation we've done a CISCA for, CISCA for, they actually wanted to take, they didn't have any consumers for some of their areas, so the corporate services area of the business. So they actually asked us to take those questions out of the inventory. So they didn't want to be assessed against the standards. Now, we're unlikely to ever do this again, by the way. This is in development and learning. So don't write this down as an option because it didn't work, is the end of my story. So they took that out. And then what they found is they weren't able to get a combined picture of the whole organisation. They had 2 pictures. They had people that didn't, you know, non-client facing, and then they had client facing. And they said, but where's it together? I said, well, you did different surveys. We can't actually pull it together. And so that can be the challenge after the fact. So totally open to exactly what you're saying, Wayne. If to pitch at different levels with, you know, governance and all that, totally fine. Just knowing earlier on in the piece, unlike this organisation, and we obviously didn't articulate that clearly enough, that they aren't able to pull it together for one picture. And some people like the one picture, especially for board reports and things like that.
Sasha, I had a question. So for areas like corporate services, can you use like internal customers?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things we've learned is it's better to leave the customer questions in there and just define what the customers are. So in your comms, and we can also build it into the email text that goes out to the survey, because as you know, that's completely up to you to write the email text. So we say things like, when asked about customers, if you work in corporate services, your customer would be internal customers, for example. If people really struggle with that concept, there's always the NA option, the not applicable. So for those of you that aren't aware, as soon as someone ticks not applicable, it just removes that from the inventory. They don't get assessed. It doesn't make the person's overall result better or worse. It just doesn't count that question. So worst case scenario, there is the NA option. However, yeah, like you said, Susan, our recommendation would be just to define who the customer is, which is why I do quite like the terminology customer.
Sash, I think Joe was asking about pricing of the CISCA, if we're happy to have a conversation about that. And of course,
Sure. So we've done it in terms of team size. So a CISCA is per CISCA. It's $2,500 for a size of, Donna, correct me, it's 10 to 50 people. Yeah, so a team of 10 to 50 people, we're looking at $2,500. And that includes, sorry, for this team, not include, have as many consumers and family members as you like, that's fine. So we're doing it by team size. The reason we do it by team size is the report length is mostly the same, but the analysis of the data takes longer. So if it's less than 10 staff members, and then there's 40 staff members, they're different price points, because obviously it's quicker to analyse 10 staff than 40. So we've got a between, and the only reason I'm starting with between 10 and 50, it's our most common price point. So it's $2,500 for a site or a team of between 10 and 50 people. It's less than that, Donna, 840, 890? I haven't done less than that, so I'm not sure.
So it's 880 for a team of 5 to 10.
Thank you. 880 for 5 to 10, and then it's more for over 50. I haven't done over 50 either.
Yeah, so 50 plus is 6,100.
Thank you. We will circulate that information after today, because I don't think I explained that very well.
And have you just gone into an organisation and just done CISCA?
No, interestingly, I mean, we can, you totally can. And interestingly, all of our organisations we've done it have started with CISCA. So they're already, it's a soft, it's easier, it's kind of like a soft sell. It's an easy introduction to the whole concept is CISCA, and then they're looking to do CISCA. However, we've just put a couple of proposals out there for an organisation to start with. There's actually an organisation to start with CISCA first and then look at doing the CILCA for the manager as part of the same process. That, you know, it's just in a proposal format. So it definitely is possible to do CISCA completely in a standalone assessment. Our experience though is that people tend to already be familiar with CILCA first, and then that's where the introduction to the model comes from. It doesn't have to be that way. Best practice is they do both.
I had another question, and I haven't had time to take in all of the detail yet on the customer bit, but I'm trying to imagine like stepping back from your existing customer survey. And I'm wondering how, like, and it's great sort of seeing the NPS there, but I'm wondering how comprehensive it is. Are you going to be missing out on much by stepping back from what you've currently got?
We can give you a sample of the questions that we ask the customers. You're right, it may be different. And that's one of the conversations I recommend as an AP you have with your organisation. You look at the existing. What I typically do is I invite them to share with me what they're currently asking. Then I'll show them what CISCA will be asking, and then sort of explain how you're actually going to get different questions with the same measurement. So the main part is that it's the consumer outcome statements, which are really valuable because that's actually what the auditing bodies use. Then there's obviously customer satisfaction, net promoter score, which are more marketing and benchmarking, but still helpful. And then the open text questions.
So we can have a look at those and we can cross-reference and see from the staff side and the consumer side what's...
Yeah. That's probably a really useful document for us, Donna, to put together. We haven't got, we'll do, and circulate. All right. Well, you've suddenly gone quiet, which is hopefully means you've all got a lot of information.
I think, Sash, a common question that's coming through is about what materials are available for the accredited practitioners to use for themselves and for engaging with potential clients.
Sure.
So I will send you a link to the Dropbox for CISCA. In that it will have this pack, this recording. It will have the brochures and sample reports that we have available. The case study that Sasha has shared with you is still hot off the press, so we haven't transferred that into a brochure or flyer that you can use just yet, but we're comfortable that you can use this slide pack as the basis of a conversation. And once we have those additional sort of marketing promotional materials, we'll add them to the Dropbox and I will let you know that they are there.
Yeah, the case study we're really working on at the moment, and we're our colleague is meeting with the CEO of this organisation in a couple of weeks to actually get him to give a testimonial and talk about his experience, meaning we'll actually be able to name the organisation and all those things as well. So we're wanting to put a proper case study together, and it's still, I'd say, 3-4 weeks away. In the meantime, use what I've shared with you. It's de-identified and I'm more than comfortable with you sharing that as an example.
And it's, of course, you're always free to contact me in any way, you know, phone, email, Zoom, Teams meeting, whichever, to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer those and connect with Sash and the team for those that I can't, and keep you up to date with anything that's coming out for CISCA as well as for CILCA Level 1. As we do more and more of those surveys, we get more and more information and we can share the so what we're understanding from those as well.
Yeah. So particularly with CISCA, what we haven't done in today's webinar is gone through the steps of the information of what you need to get it launched and the details. We've done that intentionally because if we went through it all now and then you didn't end up launching for a few months, we'd have to go through it all over again. So we realized the best way to do it, or the best time to do it, is when you actually have a project ready to launch. So we envision, especially with CISCA, because it's a little bit more complicated than CILCA, is you're getting in touch with Donna. Donna, I've spoken to an organisation, they're really keen. What do I need to take for that first meeting? And we have checklists and frameworks and documents and timeline templates that we're more than happy to share with you to hold your hand through the administration process, because obviously we want to make that as seamless as possible. And so, yeah, the earlier you can call us, even if it's before the BD meeting, Donna, I've got this meeting and I've got no idea what to show in terms of my slides. Could I chat with someone in your team who's done a few of these before? More than happy for Donna to set a conversation up with myself or one of my colleagues to share with you what we've used, and you can use modify them to suit your own needs. So we'd love to have those calls saying, we've got a project, we need some support, and we will be more than happy to support you along that way. I myself just want to get more data, so I am very personally invested in that because I'm the research nerd.
Actually, Sash, I'm just thinking as you're talking that what we have in the CISCA Dropbox is some example proposals that people could use to, if they needed to write a proposal. And we don't have that yet in the CISCA Dropbox. So I've just added that as an action for me to add that into the Dropbox for you guys as well. So beyond the initial conversation, if you're asked to put something in writing, you've got a couple of examples of what you could do for that as well.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, look at us. We've actually kept to time. That surprised me. 3 minutes to go. So if there's no more questions, thank you everybody for being here and being flexible with the virtual nature of this delivery and then dealing with the mute and the text messaging and all that sort of stuff. I really appreciate it. Hope this conversation continues. Donna's committed to sharing all those things with you. Anything else from you, Donna?
No, I think that's everything.
Right. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.